Hi, and thanks for watching this message video. And don't forget to go through the life lesson that goes with it. And those who can't make it on Sunday, don't forget that there's a podcast of the corresponding sermon that goes with this message video that you can catch on either Apple Music or on Spotify. Today we're going through chapters 36 through 38 of the book of Isaiah, and King Hezekiah's relationship with God is being highlighted. For those who don't know the history of maybe Israel, they're separated into two kingdoms. There's Israel in the north with Samaria as its capital, and then Judah in the south with Jerusalem as its capital, and that's where King Hezekiah reigns and lives, in Jerusalem. He's the king of Judah. And he is being threatened by the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, who sends his chief of staff to give Hezekiah this message. Isaiah 36, 4 through 10. This is what the great king of Assyria says. What are you trusting in that makes you so confident? Do you think that mere words can substitute for military skill and strength? Who are you counting on that you have rebelled against me? On Egypt? If you lean on Egypt, it will be like a reed that splinters beneath your weight and pierces your hand. Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is completely unreliable. But perhaps you will say to me, we are trusting in the Lord our God. But isn't he the one who was insulted by Hezekiah? Didn't Hezekiah tear down his shrines and altars and make everyone in Judah and Jerusalem worship only at the altar here in Jerusalem? I'll tell you what, strike a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria. I will give you 2,000 horses if you can find that many men to ride on them. With your tiny army, how can you think of challenging even the weakest contingent of my master's troops, even with the help of Egypt's chariots and charioteers? What's more, do you think we have invaded your land without the Lord's direction? The Lord himself told us, attack this land and destroy it. When this chief of staff of King Sennacherib of Assyria showed up, his primary taunt to Hezekiah was, what are you trusting in that makes you so confident? So if you think about it, clearly Hezekiah had a reputation for trusting in God. And so what this guy was attempting to do was to break down that trust, to make him believe that it was all in vain. And the truth is that you and I have heard similar messages to this, if not exactly like it. If not from somebody, we've heard those whispers from an enemy in our head, hey, your trust in God is worthless. And so, like Hezekiah, we need to do what he did whenever we hear those types of messages, which is to go to God, which is what he did. Isaiah 37, 1 through 7. When King Hezekiah heard their report, he tore his clothes and put on burlap and went into the temple of the Lord. And he sent Eliakim, the palace administrator, Shebna, the court secretary, and the leading priests, all dressed in burlap, to the prophet Isaiah, son of Amoz. They told him, this is what King Hezekiah says. Today is a day of trouble, insults, and disgrace. It is like when a child is ready to be born, but the mother has no strength to deliver the baby. But perhaps the Lord your God has heard the Assyrian chief of staff, sent by the king to defy the living God, and will punish him for his words. Oh, pray for those of us who are left. After King Hezekiah's officials delivered the king's message to Isaiah, the prophet replied, say to your master, this is what the Lord says. Do not be disturbed by this blasphemous speech against me from the Assyrian king's messengers. Listen, I myself will move against him, and the king will receive a message that he is needed at home. So he will return to his land, where I will have him killed with a sword. Again, when you and I get any kind of a message or hear any kind of a thought in our mind that says we shouldn't trust in God or that our trust in God is in vain, we need to do what Hezekiah did and try to draw close to God, seek him out. Now, back to the story. As was told, Sennacherib got a message that another attack was imminent, so he ended up leaving, just like what God had predicted. But before he left, he decided to send Hezekiah one more message. Isaiah 37, 10 through 11. This message is for King Hezekiah of Judah. Don't let your God in whom you trust deceive you with promises that Jerusalem will not be captured by the king of Assyria. You know perfectly well what the kings of Assyria have done wherever they have gone. They have completely destroyed everyone who stood in their way. Why should you be any different? This systematic approach of Sennacherib to try to wear down Hezekiah's resolve is the exact same type of strategy that Satan uses on us, which means, as followers, there will be times where we'll repeatedly hear the message, why are you trusting in God? Which is essentially what Sennacherib was asking Hezekiah, and again, every time that Hezekiah had this type of a message given to him, he went to God. Again, the first time, he went to God literally at the temple and prayed to him and sent messengers to Isaiah, the prophet of God, in order to be able to hear from God. And then after the second message, he did this. Isaiah 37:14 through 20. After Hezekiah received the letter from the messengers and read it, he went up to the Lord's temple and spread it out before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed this prayer before the Lord. O Lord of heaven's armies, God of Israel, you are enthroned between the mighty cherubim. You alone are God of all the kingdoms of the earth. You alone created the heavens of the earth. Bend down, O Lord, and listen. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see. Listen to Sennacherib's words of defiance against the living God. It is true, Lord, that the kings of Assyria have destroyed all these nations, and they have thrown the gods of these nations into the fire and burned them. But of course the Assyrians could destroy them, for they were not gods at all, only idols of wood and stone shaped by human hands. Now, O Lord our God, rescue us from his power. Then all the kingdoms of the earth will know that you alone, O Lord, are God. In Hezekiah's day, if you didn't know this, God's presence literally dwelt in the temple. And so again, he was trying to draw close to God. He was trying to hear from God. He was sending messengers to this prophet of God. And this is something that you and I need to emulate, because this is how we develop our relationship with God. Even back then, this was how Hezekiah was developing his relationship with God, so that he could grow to a point whenever he was hearing some type of negative or some type of a message that was causing him fear or any kind of trouble, he then knew what to do with it because his relationship had been developed with God. And let's face it, having confidence in God when everything is calm is one thing, but trusting him in the midst of chaos is when confidence really matters. And when our chaos involves a really, really bad king who has a reputation for destroying nations, that will definitely test our confidence, like in Hezekiah's situation. But again, when we know God and trust God and go to God, God will move. Isaiah 37:21 through 29. Then Isaiah, son of Amos, sent this message to Hezekiah. This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. Because you prayed about King Sennacherib of Assyria, the Lord has spoken this word against him. The virgin daughter of Zion despises you and laughs at you. The daughter of Jerusalem shakes her head in derision as you flee. Whom have you been defying and ridiculing? Against whom did you raise your voice? At whom did you look with such haughty eyes? It was the Holy One of Israel. By your messengers you have defied the Lord. You have said, with my many chariots I have conquered the highest mountain. Yes, the remotest peaks of Lebanon. I have cut down its tallest cedars and its finest cypress trees. I have reached its farthest heights and explored its deepest forests. I have dug wells in many foreign lands and refreshed myself with their water. With the sole of my foot, I stopped up all the rivers of Egypt. But have you not heard? I decided this long ago. Long ago, I planned it, and now I am making it happen. I planned for you to crush the fortified cities into heaps of rubble. That is why their people have so little power and are so frightened and confused. They are as weak as grass and as easily trampled as tender green shoots. They are like grass sprouting on a housetop, scorched before it can grow lush and tall. But I know you well, where you stay and when you come and go. I know the way you have raged against me, and because of your raging against me and your arrogance, which I have heard for myself, I will put my hook in your nose and my bit in your mouth. I will make you return by the same road on which you came. We're told that because Hezekiah prayed, God moved, and he showed his sovereignty. And God is sovereign. And he wants everybody to know that and honor him for it. And King Sennacherib clearly was not doing that. And when you and I act like a Sennacherib and say things like, I have accomplished this, or look at what it is that I have done by my own hand, that's when we are taking the attention off of God and placing it onto ourselves. And in pride, we are rebelling against him. And God will always deal with that. And clearly, King Sennacherib needed to be dealt with. So what did God do? He killed 185,000 of his troops that very night and then sent him home on the same road that he came in on, just like he predicted he would. And oh, by the way, when he got home, not too long after that, some of his own sons decided to attack him and kill him with a sword. Yeah. Then we're told this happened. Isaiah 38:1 through 6. About that time, Hezekiah became deathly ill, and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, went to visit him. He gave the king this message. This is what the Lord says. Set your affairs in order, for you are going to die. You will not recover from this illness. When Hezekiah heard this, he turned his face to the wall and prayed to the Lord. Remember, O Lord, how I have always been faithful to you and have served you single-mindedly, always doing what pleases you. Then he broke down and wept bitterly. Then this message came to Isaiah from the Lord. Go back to Hezekiah and tell him, this is what the Lord, the God of your ancestor David says. I have heard your prayer and seen your tears. I will add 15 years to your life and will rescue you and this city from the king of Assyria. Yes, I will defend this city. In these chapters of Isaiah, we see that Hezekiah, a king of Judah, had a rich relationship with God. And the reason why was besides this faith that he had in God, there was also this desire to spend time with him, to talk with him, especially in the midst of a crisis. He was drawing close to him. And in a roundabout way, God could see that in his heart. He could see that he was wanting to be close to him every time he came to the temple, or even in this last instance when he was so sick, just simply turning his face toward the temple. So one of the questions that all of us should be asking ourselves is, what does God see in my heart? Or what does God see in our hearts? Does he see that you and I are trying to draw close to him? And if you didn't know this, God's presence now dwells in our hearts, but Jesus made it clear that when we gather together, his presence is more keenly felt. So our encouragement from these chapters of Isaiah is to do what Hezekiah did, and that is to draw close to God in his presence as much as we possibly can. And to do that today means that you and I need to be drawing as close as we possibly can to those who have God's presence within them, or in other words, we need to stay as close as we can to the church.